Having said that, a few things that really stand out for all of us is that, the whole talk or the narrative around climate change, how while it is a challenge, it is also an opportunity for us to design a different kind of a society, a narrative of equity and inclusion, particularly for vulnerable groups that have struggled for decades altogether in this country. And so as we are reshaping what responding to challenges of climate change means, the panel really brought out many, many examples of what could be done at the level of communities for inclusion, for inspiring young people to take up new initiatives, and also for engaging in this creative process of deciding what can be done. While there are many policy instruments, many suggestions which are available in the formal space, but there is also a lot of indigenous knowledge that exists. And so we talked about how it has to be the work of marrying different kinds of opportunities, which is coming from formal science, policy instruments, indigenous knowledge, and individual experiences. We also touched upon the need to look at motivations of young people and inspiring them to act from a space of purpose and internal motivation rather than, sporadic, short feel, external triggers. And what the panel talked about is that for many of them who have looked at engaging in a Nourishing Now approach to addressing challenges of climate change, it has come from an internal sense of purpose where they have felt driven to act and not sit quietly. Where their interactions with their surroundings, be it the trees, the animals, the plants around, has pushed them to actually build new relationships with nature. And as they built new relationships with nature, there was a lot of inspiration to act and not sit quietly. So, as we all were looking at how do we engage more people, these were wonderful pointers for us to look forward. One of the things that came out was looking at the larger market structure. When we talk about green technologies, enterprises, market-oriented solutions, which are now very, very popular in the ecosystem. And we talked about how, a fair share is critical, and fair share, not just in terms of communities, but in terms of earth, young people, and environment. Right? So how do we create a fair share at all levels when we are designing some of these structures, be it the markets, be it the regulations, be it the policies, be it the narratives of change, and recognizing that some of these investments are very, very simple and are existing all around us. And probably what we need to do to create an equitable space, a flourishing, thriving space for communities to engage in climate action, is to look at these solutions, pick up these small, simple solutions, and start acting in our local ecosystem. So the buzzword was act in our panel, and really get to it. And as we start doing things shaping up, new ideas start coming in. And I would stop at that. There's much more that can.
Just the ground we covered, the various perspectives that came in, how we looked at the narrative itself. We even explored the fact that fear is a part of this Nourishing Now narrative, but how do we channelize this fear and convert it and channelize this energy into creating something more hopeful? We touched upon that, and we also explored questions like people, planet, profit. All these are elements of a successful solution-oriented approach. But in many ways, what we also discussed was how are we going to prioritize this, and are these solutions going to work if we put profit first, if we put people first, if we put planet first. And that's, I think, something that individually, as individuals, as entrepreneurs, or as stakeholders in this space, all of us will need to start thinking about that while all three are important, how are we placing them? Some of the things that I want to highlight, I'm aware that we have to close this soon. Some of the things that I want to highlight from our discussion was that while we keep the problem visible, we can't forget the problem. We can't stop talking about the problem. We have to shift to a solution-oriented, solution-driven approach, where we also decode the problem and we provide solutions in a way that it makes sense. It is adaptable. It is implementable for all of us. We understand what it means. The other bit that we talked about was impact of individual action and the awareness of that impact. If we are careful, if we are mindful of what we are doing every day and what it means, like one of our panelists very aptly said, our action or our inaction, both these will create impact, and we will have to choose whether we are okay with that impact that we are going to create with our action or inaction. We also talked about a value system that governs this work, that should govern this work. We talked about having a sense of curiosity, having a sense of, we said entrepreneurial nature, basically who's going to take charge and who's going to say, I want to solve this problem. And we had probably a living example of that entrepreneurial curious spirit on our panel as well, that always kept us, focused on building a hopeful future. Perception change, we very nicely wound up the discussion with fear and fashion. ये दोनों चीजें हैं जिनसे behavior change drive होगा. Fashion कैसे बनाएं अब इसको? सिर्फ fear से ही तो काम नहीं चलने वाला है. So how are we going to work on this perception change, this behavior change that helps us move towards a more hopeful future for all of us? A big gap that I think all of us agreed to in many ways was gap in awareness. The way we understand climate change as an issue, the way we even understand solutions, and the way we understand what needs to be done. Our panel discussed how we are currently living with two extremes. कुछ नहीं हो सकता है क्योंकि कल ही मरने वाले हैं, ये है, या फिर प्रॉब्लम ज्यादा है ही नहीं. ये दो एक्सट्रीम्स के बीच में अभी हम we are rocking. And we need to find the solution which is not in either of these extremes. कल भी नहीं मरने वाले हैं, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम है ही नहीं, ऐसा भी नहीं है. So how do we now find a solution in between these two extremes? And how do we, very important, I think for me personally, in the context of this conversation was, how do we make this a part of a daily conversation for our young people? And it stops being something that is discussed outside. It stops being something that is discussed when you are preparing for an exam, when you are participating in a conference, when you are writing a paper. But it becomes a part of my daily conversation with my friends. मैं जब अपने दोस्तों के साथ गप्पे मार रही हूँ, तब भी मैं climate change discuss कर पाऊँ. I think वो कर पाना वो एक बहुत बड़ा challenge और action item है शायद हम सबके लिए. And how do we link that to rewards? How do we incentivize this behavior? Benefit कैसे दिखेगा to young people and to all of us कि मैं ये करूँ तो क्या मुझे मिलेगा? Not in a very transactional sense of the word, but looking at something that drives, that motivates me to act. I think